Okay, perfect. So for the first question, I want to chat about, William, can you tell me a little bit about your background and, what inspired you to become a franchise consultant?
Yeah, happy to. So I spent about 30 years in the corporate world after graduating from school. And the first 10 years or so were in retail management. The last 20 or so years were in the media industry. And unfortunately, most of my time in the media industry is when the industry was in decline. And it was very, very difficult industry to work in. Encountered a lot of toxic environments, a lot of struggling places where I worked. And it was just tough. And I have known my entire life, going all the way back till I was about 7 years old, that I was meant to be an entrepreneur. And so in 2019 is when I finally made the decision to take control of my own life, leave the corporate world, and start my own businesses. So I started a few businesses after leaving the corporate world: a rental car company, a travel agency, a professional coaching practice, and all of that kind of led me into the world of franchising. And I discovered as a franchise development manager for another brand that I was actually pretty darn good at it. In about 18 months, I was able to open about 90 units around the country. And when I learned about franchise brokering, particularly the Franchise Brokers Association, that was when my eyes were open to this reality that I can do with about 800 companies across 37 different industries what I was already doing a darn good job with just one brand in one industry. So it was an easy yes for me. I opened up my brokerage in the spring of 2023, and it's been fantastic.
Awesome. Yeah, I know you've had a ton of good experience, which I think makes you a really valuable franchise consultant and broker, because you can really share your experience with your clients. And I think it's something that they're really able to relate to. And yeah, I know that we've been connected for the past couple of years, and I've really seen your success, which is awesome. So another question for you. When you work with your clients, what is your process for understanding their goals and skills and financial needs before you actually go ahead and recommend their franchise options?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. And I think it's important to recognize right out of the gate that in my brokerage, we're not in the sales process. We're in the relationship process. And that's what we're doing here. We're building relationships with our candidates. We're building relationships between our candidates and the franchisors. And so everything is built on this foundation of a relational approach to working with our candidates. So it always begins with a simple introductory call. We spend about 15 or 20 minutes on a phone call, getting to know one another, telling them about what we do, how we do it, how we can help them, and then learning from our candidates about, what kind of business have you always dreamed of owning? What types of businesses sound exciting to you? We want you to love your business as much 10 years down the road as you do on grand opening day. So we're not here just to help you invest a lot of time and money and resources into another job for yourself. We really want you to love this. So we spend a lot of time talking about their passions and their interests, but also their financial position and what their financial goals are, their financial qualifications. After that call, we then spend 3 or 4 days conducting research on our inventory of 800 or so brands, and using the information provided by the candidate and an entrepreneurial assessment that we ask them to complete. We're typically able to take that inventory of 800 brands or so and narrow it down to 8 or 10 that are going to be really a great fit for this person, and that also have available territories in their market. Once we've completed our research, we jump on a Zoom call together for a brand presentation, typically about an hour, where we do a high-level overview of each brand. We talk about the concept, what they do, the history of the company. We talk about the investment requirements. We talk about the potential return on investment utilizing item 19 historical data. And by the time we get to the end of that meeting, they typically have seen 1 or 2 or 3 that they're really excited about. And it's at that point where we position them as a high priority candidate with the franchise. We have great relationships with franchises like Schoolie Mitchell, for instance, and we know that our candidates are really going to get bumped up near the top of that list when we present them, because they've already been pre-qualified, and we know that they're a great candidate. So once we make that introduction, that kicks off usually about a 6 to 10 to 12 week due diligence process. And unlike a lot of brokers out there, this is a long-term relationship for us. We stay with our candidates all the way through the process, all the way to the finish line when they're awarded their franchise. We do that through weekly strategy calls, providing them with resources and just being there for them to make sure, being there as their advocate to make sure that everything is happening exactly the way they need it to happen.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think, William, you and your team, you've built a really great discovery process. And yeah, I know as you've worked with Schoolie Mitchell, it's so clear how much you really care about helping the client that you're working with. You're really genuine in ensuring that you find a great match for them. So that's really wonderful to hear. I guess on the other side of things, how do you evaluate and vet franchises before you feel comfortable recommending the model to a client that you're working with?
Yeah, one of the great advantages we have is being a member of the Franchise Brokers Association. And there's this whole team of people in Orlando, Florida that really do a lot of this work for us behind the scenes. They find the great franchises, they do the vetting, they do the research. And when they drop into our inventory as a brand that we can represent, we already have a pretty high comfort level that this is going to be a really strong concept that we can have confidence presenting. But nevertheless, we always like to make sure on our own, even though they may be in the FBA inventory, we want to make sure that we personally feel good about presenting them. So we do a pretty thorough review of their franchise disclosure document. We're making sure that the item 7 investment level looks reasonable compared to other similar concepts. We look at item 19 information to, first of all, make sure that there is item 19 information. And if there is, to make sure that it does represent a strong return on investment potential. We also look at the item 20 to look at the retention rate, openings, closings, and make sure that the brand is stable, preferably growing and not in decline. And of course, we're always looking through there for things like litigations and issues that the brand may have had in the past. Sure. So we check all those boxes before we actually present a brand to someone.
Yeah, no, that's great insight. I agree with you. It's nice to have such a strong company like FBA that you get to work with, and they help you in that due diligence process as well. So that's excellent. William, if you're comfortable sharing, do you have an example of a kind of a challenging client placement that you had to deal with? And if so, how did you work through it in order to find the right fit for that client?
Yeah, I did. I had a young couple that I was working with really early in 2024. And we looked at several different concepts together. And we ended up, kind of moving around from industry to industry. We seemed to have a little bit of a difficult time finding the franchise that really resonated with them. We had to go back to the drawing board a few different times. And, we actually got them awarded a franchise. And then after the award, they kind of backed out and said, you know what, I think we made a mistake here. So we had to navigate this very difficult thing of stepping away from a franchise after it had already been awarded and the franchise fee had been paid. And then, we had to try to help them exit as gracefully as we could and then pivot them to another brand. And, we had to really double down on our due diligence for that second brand to make sure we didn't have a repeat of the first situation. So, but we were able to take them to a second brand. They loved it. They moved forward. They became a franchise owner, and we're very happy with the outcome.
Well, yeah, that must have been a little stressful at the beginning, but I'm glad to hear it all worked out in the end. That's great. Another question, how do you tailor your approach for clients who have varying and different financial situations or even different business backgrounds?
Yeah, we deal with people from all different points on the financial spectrum. I just got off the phone with from a strategy call with one of my candidates, and he's got millions of dollars in the bank. He doesn't need financing. He's going to just fund it out of his liquid capital. Easy. Love those candidates. So super easy to work with. But then we have other folks, who are on the opposite end of that spectrum, and they have very low liquid capital, and it's a little bit more challenging to work with them. So one of the approaches we take is with a low liquid capital candidate, is they may have their sights set on a really big franchise with a really big investment. It's just out of their reach right now. So typically what we'll do is we'll say, let's just build a bridge. Okay. You don't have to give up on your dreams of business ownership. We can just build a bridge, and we're going to build a bridge by helping you find a really good low investment franchise that you can get into with your current financial position. And then you're going to exercise the discipline to roll a portion of your profits from that first business into a startup capital fund for the next big one that you want to get into. And it may be a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road, but we're going to help you build a bridge from where you are today to where you want to go. And again, we're fortunate that we have some really strong business funding partners in this space. And whenever we know that we're working with someone who has a challenging financial situation, right from the start, as soon as we make that brand presentation and they see a concept that they're interested in, we connect them with our funding expert right at the very beginning to give us plenty of runway to figure out the financing before we get to that award day.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the neat thing about franchising, especially starting out. People, they aren't aware that there's so many different models and brands out there, and working with people like yourself, you can help educate them and understand there is a model you can start with, and like you said, build up to the model they maybe originally had in mind. And yeah, excellent to have the funding partners too. Perfect. Another question, can you share with me a particular story of a client that you worked with and they chose the right business for them and ended up finding success? How proud does that make you feel being their franchise broker when you're able to help someone fulfill their dreams?
It's such a good feeling because you're setting people free from a degree of bondage that they're in. There's usually, in a lot of cases, when someone's looking at starting a business, there's significant pain in their life. They're unhappy in their role. They're not meeting their financial goals. Maybe they're in a declining industry and they're just burnt out. They're tired and it's just beating them up. But it's something they've done their entire lives, and they lay awake at night thinking, I need out quickly. But gosh, I don't know what I would do next if I were to leave. The industry that I told you about that I came out of, the media industry, one of my first initiatives after opening up my brokerage is I wanted to help people in that industry because I knew what they were facing. I knew what they were dealing with on a day in, day out basis. I could speak their language. And I connected with a newspaper publisher in Tennessee, and it was just a cold outreach. I reached out to him on LinkedIn. He didn't know me. I didn't know him. It's just one of those cold messages from a stranger that most of us delete and hope that we never see again. But he graciously replied and he said, yeah, I'd love to have a conversation. And that led us to begin the process together. And in our brand presentation, he chose 3 different concepts to take a little bit deeper dive into. Very quickly, 2 of those fell away. One of them rose to the top. He absolutely loved the brand. And we went the distance, and he went to Discovery Day. He was awarded his franchise. And I remember just the text that I got on that day, all caps, exclamation points. I've been awarded my franchise. And then he texted me again a week or 2 later. I just turned in my resignation, and I was jumping up and down with him, from a distance. And then a couple months later, I think it was his birthday, I saw it pop up on LinkedIn, and I just sent him a happy birthday message, and he replied back and said, thanks, man. He said, I got to tell you, my business is doing fantastic. He told me the revenue numbers that he was hitting just 3 months into his business blew my mind. Told me that he is already hiring his first employee. And then he came back actually a couple weeks ago and gave me an update, and his business just continues to soar. So to be able to help someone who was in a very similar situation that I personally went through, to escape, to find a beautiful franchise, and to have such tremendous success in his first year, my goodness, so rewarding.
That's awesome. What an incredible story. I bet it feels so amazing to know that you played a role in changing someone's life so positively. That's awesome. And I love that you stay in touch. Last question to wrap up our interview. Can you share some of the most common misconceptions that you've noticed that clients have about franchising, and how do you address those with your clients?
Yeah, 3 things come to mind. The first misconception that people often have is that franchising is just about food. They think McDonald's, they think Subway, they think Chick-fil-A, and a lot of people do not want to be in the food business. But what they don't realize is, golly, there's over 4,000 franchise systems in the United States in just about any industry that you can think of. So any kind of business that you can imagine, there's a good chance that there is a franchise that's going to be a really good fit for you. So I would say that is misconception number 1. The second one would be that franchising is just for the rich and the wealthy. I could I really own a franchise? I can't see myself, being able to do that. But that's again a misconception. Yeah, there are franchises out there that do require $1 million, several $1 million in investment, but there's a lot of franchises where your all-in startup investment is under 100,000 or maybe 100 to 150,000 that drive very significant revenue, very strong profit margins, and so it's fun to be able to open people's eyes to the reality of the breadth and depth of the franchising industry. And I think the third misconception is that people think that if they have the cash, they can just walk in and buy a franchise. And they don't understand, a lot of folks, that this is an award process. It's not a purchase. It's not like walking into a used car lot and driving off with a new or with a 2022 BMW or whatever the case may be. This is an award process, and you have to approach this the same way that you would approach interviews to get your dream job, the dream job that you've wanted your entire life. From the moment we introduce you to a franchise, that franchise is evaluating you as much as you are evaluating them. And it doesn't matter if you have $100 million in the bank. If you show that you are not someone who can follow a system, who believes in the brand, who can be coachable, trainable, and create a healthy, vibrant business culture, you're probably going to get rejected regardless of how much money you have in the bank. So those, I think, would be the three misconceptions that I come across most often.
Yeah, no, I would totally agree with that. And I think the food one is a really good point, because that's, before I got into franchising, that's totally what I thought of. I thought of McDonald's and Subway, and it's amazing. Like you mentioned, 4,000 different models in the US. There's really a good fit for just about anyone out there. So yeah, that's perfect.